The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anxious energy, 1,000 whispered conversations threading through the domed hall like restless spirits. It wasn't often that an emergency session was called. It was even rarer for the emergency to concern visitors from a death world. When the announcement came, representatives of Earth are en route to the Council, a tangible chill swept the room. Delegates stiffened in their seats, scales bristling, feathers trembling, appendages curling inwards. Security personnel doubled their patrols, clutching weapons they knew were largely symbolic against what was coming. No one spoke of it openly, but the legends haunted every species present. Deathworlders, creatures so resilient, so savage by necessity, that entire planetary systems had quietly updated their contingency protocols at humanity's first broadcasted wars. Earth, the mad crucible of hurricanes, apex predators, tectonic fury, and endless conflict, had birthed beings that survived where no sane life form would tread. And now, 2 of them were walking into the Council. Major Lucas Vance led the way, boots ringing sharply against the marble floor. He moved like a storm bottled inside human flesh, tightly coiled, deliberate, brimming with a threat that required no words. Deep scars crisscrossed the back of his hands, a testament to a life clawed from merciless conditions. His sharp gray eyes swept the chamber once, memorizing exits, vulnerabilities, opportunities. At his side walked Commander Asher Kor, a woman who seemed to wear serenity like a blade. She was smaller than Lucas, compact and graceful, but carried herself with the casual authority of someone who had never once doubted her ability to dismantle anything, or anyone, that stood in her way. Her dark hair was braided tightly against her head, military precision embodied. Neither smiled. Neither needed to. As they crossed the threshold, the nearest delegates instinctively recoiled, seats scraping backwards. Lucas caught the motion from the corner of his eye and exchanged a glance with Asher, a flicker of shared amusement barely stirring the corners of his mouth. Fear was predictable. Fear was useful. The council chair, a spindly Vrinaxi with translucent skin and a permanently tremulous voice, struggled to maintain composure. We welcome the honored representatives of Earth to this session of diplomatic engagement, he stammered, gesturing them toward 2 empty seats at the front of the hall. Lucas paused just long enough for the silence to stretch uncomfortably. Asher smiled thinly, the kind of smile that made the Vrinax's spines flatten against his skull. Then, in perfect synchronization, they moved to their seats and sat with the kind of measured, heavy finality that made lesser beings flinch. A tentative cough broke the stalemate. A delegation from the Jathari Confederacy, tall, willowy beings known for their diplomacy, attempted to bridge the gap. We trust Earth's intentions here are peaceful, the ambassador said, voice brittle. Lucas tilted his head slightly, studying the speaker as one might study a curious insect. Of course, he said, voice low and even. Earth has always been an advocate for peace. Asher added, tone light as glass, though peace, as we define it, tends to be permanent. The Jathari ambassador looked as though he might collapse into dust. Beneath the table, unseen by most, Lucas flexed his fingers once, a tiny gesture, scanning the room for reactions. Eyes darted away. Murmurs rippled. Even the most stoic delegations, species hardened by centuries of interstellar conflict, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Deathworlders weren't doing anything overtly aggressive. They didn't have to. Their presence alone unsettled the balance, tilted the axis around which this fragile coalition spun. Lucas leaned back in his chair, boots planted firmly, one arm draped lazily over the seat's edge. It was a posture of absolute ownership. Asher mirrored him in spirit, if not in detail, back straight, hands folded neatly, exuding the quiet menace of a blade hidden in a velvet sheath. The council chair cleared his throat again, a desperate sound. If Earth would be so kind, perhaps you might outline the nature of your proposal to this assembly. Lucas gave a slow, deliberate nod. In due time, he said, each syllable cutting through the air with surgical precision. First, we observe. It is important to understand the terrain before taking action. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a statement. It was a warning, dressed politely enough to maintain the illusion of diplomacy. For a moment, the chamber hung suspended, as if the entire structure itself dared not breathe too loudly. Somewhere near the back, a minor official, some poor functionary from a soft world, fainted with a muted thud. No one rushed to help him. Asha's gaze lingered on the fallen being, then swept back to the assembly with mild curiosity. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The session continued, nominally, but the tone had irrevocably shifted. Every word, every glance, every decision from that point forward was made in the looming shadow of Earth's quiet, merciless representatives. The council could still pretend they were in control, but everyone in the room knew the truth. Lucas watched them squirm, memeizing faces, alliances, cracks in the facade. Earth hadn't come for war. It had come to win something far more enduring, obedience, carved neatly from the bones of fear. And they hadn't even begun negotiating yet. The council chambers were quieter now, the constant shuffle of nervous movement replaced by a strained stillness. Every being present understood, on some primal level, that whatever would happen next depended entirely on the two humans seated with disconcerting ease at the heart of the assembly. Lucas Vance drummed his fingers lightly against the table, a steady, patient rhythm that grated on the nerves of even the sturdiest delegates. Commander Asher Kor remained motionless, watching the crowd with the unblinking patience of a hunter content to let prey exhaust itself. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room without need for amplification. Earth proposes a pact, he said simply, as though he were offering a hand in friendship rather than reshaping the future of the galaxy. A mutual defense agreement, designed to ensure peace among the member species. There was a pause, a collective breath held tight. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. But every diplomat worth their salt recognized the trap embedded in the words. Mutual, yes, but the scales of power would be hopelessly tipped. The Vrinaxi chair struggled for words, throat clicking audibly. And the particulars of this arrangement. Asha answered this time, her voice crisp and surgical. Earth will provide military support, logistical aid, and technological advancements. In return, member states will align their foreign policy interests with Earth's recommendations. A modest exchange, considering the alternatives. Her smile was the sharpest blade yet unsheathed in the room. A tremor passed among the delegates. The Jithari ambassador opened his mouth to object, but Lucas fixed him with a stare so cold, so unflinchingly indifferent, that the words died before they could be born. Lucas leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the polished table. We have reviewed your security protocols. We have studied your military readiness. His gaze swept the room, pinning each delegate in place like insects under glass. You are not ready for what lurks beyond the rim. You are not ready for what might already be among you. A low, uncomfortable murmur stirred the assembly. Fear of the unknown, the oldest, deepest fear of all, rippled outward from his words. Asher casually tapped a small device on the table. Holographic images flickered into existence, depicting monstrous ships, fractured worlds, silent graveyards of once proud civilizations. These are the remnants of other councils. Ones who believed they could negotiate their survival. Silence answered her. Lucas gave them a moment to absorb the lesson, then continued, tone soft but unrelenting. Earth survived because Earth adapts. Earth survives because it understands that survival sometimes means preemptive action. The chair found his voice, though it was a pale, shaking thing. And if we refuse? Lucas smiled, slow and wolfish. Then Earth will remain vigilant. Alone. The unspoken message was clear. Earth alone would survive what was coming. Everyone else would become a footnote. For a long moment, no one moved. No one dared. Then, as if on cue, an aide hurried into the chamber bearing a tray laden with refreshments, a diplomatic formality, an attempt to reset the tone of the meeting. The aide, a small, avian creature from a low-gravity world, set a crystal decanter in front of Lucas and poured a glass of amber liquid. A sharp scent filled the air, a mild neurotoxin by most species standards, intoxicating, even deadly. Lucas picked up the glass, sniffed it once, then drank deeply without hesitation. The aide went rigid with horror. A ripple of disbelief swept the chamber. Lucas set the empty glass down with a click and wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. "Delicious," he said blandly. The point was made. Again, without violence, without fanfare, just an effortless demonstration of how thoroughly Deathworlders were built for survival in environments that would kill others without hesitation. Asher, not to be outdone, reached casually toward the ceremonial gravestone centerpiece of the council's table, a dense artifact meant to symbolize unity, designed to require a mechanical lift for transport. She picked it up with one hand, examining it as if it were no heavier than a book. The room froze. Asher set it back down with a gentle thud, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Nice craftsmanship," she murmured. The council chair swallowed hard, sweat beading across his translucent skin. "We will need time to deliberate." Lucas rose to his feet, his movements liquid, deliberate. "Take all the time you require," he said. "But understand, the universe does not grant infinite chances." Asher stood as well, brushing a non-existent speck of dust from her uniform sleeve. She said nothing, but her silence echoed louder than words. Without waiting for permission, they turned and left the chamber, boots ringing once more against marble as the doors swung shut behind them. The council remained seated long after they had gone, paralyzed, hearts hammering in their chests, a silent consensus forming before a single vote was cast. Earth would not need to conquer the galaxy. The galaxy would offer itself up, trembling, and call it an alliance. Night cloaked the Earth enclave in deep shadows, broken only by the sterile glow of security lights tracing the compound's perimeter. Inside the main briefing hall, Lucas and Asher stood before a wall-sized display, its surface alive with shifting patterns of intercepted signals, coded transmissions, and unknown threats whispering at the edges of known space. The room was otherwise empty, save for them and the weight of what was coming. "They've started probing the inner systems," Asher said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Preliminary attacks disguised as piracy. Testing responses. Measuring weakness." Lucas watched the red dots pulse and fade across the star map. "The Council will blame each other. Fracture their own defenses before the real war begins." Asher folded her arms, her silhouette sharp against the screen's cold light. "And when the screams start, they'll turn to us." "They already have," Lucas said. He tapped a flashing icon, a distress beacon from a colony only half a cycle old, now silent. "The question is, do we save them, or do we let the lesson burn a little deeper?" For a moment, neither spoke. The morality of it was irrelevant, survival had no room for sentiment. Lucas exhaled slowly, a breath dragged from somewhere heavy inside him. "Dispatch a rapid response team. Hit fast. Leave no doubt." Asher nodded, already accessing secure channels. Her hands moved with the mechanical efficiency of someone long past the burden of hesitation. Footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond. A moment later, a young operative entered, stiff-backed and wide-eyed, clutching a data pad. "Sir, Commander," she began, voice cracking slightly under the pressure. Lucas turned, one eyebrow arched. "Report." The operative swallowed hard. "New intelligence, sir. Unverified but credible. The aggressors, they are not unknown." Lucas's posture shifted imperceptibly, a fraction tighter. "Explain." The operative hesitated, glancing nervously at Asher before pressing on. "Analysis suggests they are former Council species. One's written off as extinct after prior conflicts." Asher narrowed her eyes. "Extinct doesn't mean dead." "No, the operative said quickly. "It means angry, patient, and smart enough to know that fear can rot a civilization from within better than any warhead." Lucas reached for the pad, scrolling through the attached visuals. Grainy images of ships made from scavenged wreckage. Signals laced with ancient council languages twisted into something unrecognizable. Crests of long-fallen empires sewn together into grotesque banners. A coalition of the forgotten, the abandoned, the betrayed. Asher stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. "We created them. When we survived, when they didn't. Lucas set the pad down carefully, as if it might explode. This isn't just war. This is vengeance. The weight of that truth settled over the room like a physical thing. The operative lingered, unsure whether her presence was still required. Lucas dismissed her with a nod, and she fled, leaving behind only the soft hiss of the closing door. Asher moved to a console and pulled up deeper archives, cross-referencing ancient battle records against the new data. If they're moving now, it means they think we're weak. Lucas's mouth twisted into a grim smile. They'll learn otherwise. He turned back to the star map, watching as more distress signals flickered into existence like dying stars. Asher's voice was a knife through the quiet. We'll have to make examples. Lucas didn't flinch. We always knew it would come to this. Earth had survived not because it was kinder or wiser, but because it understood the primal laws of existence, strength, vigilance, and the brutal certainty that mercy was a currency often repaid in blood. Asher closed the archives with a flick of her wrist. We'll need authorization to escalate. You have it, Lucas said immediately. Total Defense Protocol. Preemptive strikes when necessary. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling against the compound walls like the cries of ghosts. Lucas paced slowly toward the observation window, hands clasped loosely behind his back. In the distance, the city glowed faintly, oblivious to how close it hovered to the brink of extinction. They'll curse us, Asher said, joining him. They already do, Lucas replied. But when the storm breaks, when the old monsters come to collect the debts this galaxy forgot it owed, he turned to meet her gaze, eyes hard, unyielding. They'll realize we were the only ones who remembered how to fight. Silence stretched between them, deep and heavy. Asher nodded once, a soldier's acceptance of an ugly duty. Then we give them a war they won't survive. Lucas allowed himself a brief, grim chuckle. No. We give them a reminder. The room dimmed automatically as an alert chimed through the enclave. The first retaliation orders were already being disseminated. Squadrons were scrambling. Weapons were being primed. The galaxy had forgotten what real survival looked like. Earth was about to reintroduce it. Lucas and Asher turned away from the window, away from the fragile city lights, and strode back toward the command center. Their steps echoed in perfect rhythm, two figures forged by a world that had never given them the luxury of peace. The stars beyond waited, patient and hungry, and humanity moved to meet them, not with open hands, but with clenched fists, and the cold certainty that survival was not a gift. It was a conquest.